How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there, hanging in there.
Oh, good, 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 good. What's new?
Okay, Mark. I'll just start over with the question. So, what would you say to your neighboring people in York County, Rock Hill, Fort Mill area that travel into Charlotte? What would you say to them in regards to their governor opening up South Carolina?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for us to understand that even within a state, every region is different. The population is different, the makeup and the demographics. And so we still have to be very, very cautious as we move about and interact with our neighbors, no matter where they are. So I think we still have to continue to push social distancing where appropriate. We also have to make sure that we're implementing the best practices as it relates to stopping the spread and also flattening the curve. And so, no matter if you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, or anywhere where states may be relaxing restrictions or opening up, we still have to make sure that we practice good habits so that we can protect those that we love.
So is the danger in opening too soon? Is one of the dangers it could cause another spike, prolong people being at home longer, prolong a shelter in place, or just put us right back where we started?
Yeah, I think, and so I want to be careful not to speak as a public health official, but I
Okay.
think if we're applying common sense to this, certainly opening too soon could have adverse repercussions. It could undo everything that we've done with the stay-at-home orders, and also as it relates to the social distancing. I think we could certainly see a spike if we open too soon. I think Dr. Anthony Fauci is the one who said that in the article recently, that we want to be very, very careful about opening up the economy too soon. Also, there's been other data that points to potentially after the summer, we could see another spike. So there's a lot of data out there that's telling us to be very cautious. And we've got to make sure, particularly as elected officials, that we're not doing things or making decisions that are based on party affiliation or partisanship. But we have to do what's best for the people that we're trying to serve.
Absolutely. So here in Mecklenburg County, what are the current peak projections or the curve for the Charlotte area?
So, as it relates to where we are right now, Yolanda, that's a great question. The, the projections continue to move. Our last meeting, we were slotted to peak around June 8th. There's additional modeling that says we may not peak until June 25th.
Hmm.
And so it depends on the model that we're using. I know that we are trying to put mechanisms in place right now to prepare for what happens after the peak, what happens while we're flattening the curve, particularly as it relates to the economy. Also, we're trying to stand up as many sites because we know testing is really the key.
Correct.
And so we're trying to stand up as many sites in vulnerable communities and ensuring that we're hitting vulnerable populations as it relates to our seniors, communities of color, and people that are essentially at high risk because of the types of jobs that they do. So
Hmm.
it's very, very important that we continue to track that, look at the data, and make decisions based on that.
So now, is there a multi-county team or group working to minimize the control or the spread between, like multi-state, multi-county, or is just Mecklenburg? Is it just working as its own entity?
That's a great question. And so we have an emergency operations center that stood up that obviously is housed here in Mecklenburg County, but is in constant contact with our neighbors in York County, Union, Cabarrus, and in essentially the region. One thing that we realize is that our two hospital systems are utilized by people outside of this region. So even people that do not live in Mecklenburg County leverage our hospital systems because of the expertise and the level
Mm-hmm.
of quality of care that you receive when you come to Mecklenburg County.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that that effort has to be a comprehensive effort and a regional effort as we try to attack this.
Okay, thank you for that. So there have been roughly over 500,000 unemployment claims in the state of North Carolina. How is Mecklenburg County prepared to combat that? Like, what is Mecklenburg County doing to help the unemployed?
So there's quite a few things that we're trying to do as it relates to particularly small businesses. The county commission stood up 2 loan funds. One is a micro lending fund to assist those folks that have employees of 5 employees or less with they are eligible to receive a loan up to $10,000. And then there's another fund, the Emergency Stabilization Fund, what started with $5 million, loans between $5,000 and $35,000 for those businesses with 50 employees or less. And so what we wanted to do was really attack and try to stand up and help stabilize small businesses, micro businesses. And then on top of that, what we've been doing is certainly working with our partners across the state and the city for to make sure that people are aware of additional options that may be out there, and helping people navigate the unemployment loophole is very interesting, because at the county level, we don't have control over it. But of course, we're typically the first point of contact.
Right,
so
right.
We've been trying to put out as much information as humanly possible, working with our partners at the state, working with our partners at the federal government as well. The claims have been overwhelming. The system wasn't designed to absorb this many claims. And so there is a huge backlog. There's also a huge backlog for those individuals who are self-employed,
Right.
Or contractors, which is extremely important because we know that they are truly the backbone of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And typically what you have are small businesses. Most people work in small businesses, and that is not only here locally, but statewide and nationally, certainly are the drivers of the economy. And so we've been trying to ensure that we put as much information out as possible, help to stand up small businesses and those contractors and those people that have micro businesses.
Now, what were the names of those 2 assistance programs that you just
Yeah.
said?
So it's the Emergency Stabilization Fund, was a $5 million fund that small business owners could take a loan out for between $5,000 and $35,000. And then there's the micro business lending fund that businesses can take out up to $10,000. Both programs are fantastic. They're low documentation programs. You can also have alternative documentation. It's a streamlined application process. It's designed to get small business owners and contractors funds within 10 days at the most. We also will be looking at replenishing the fund as well, because we know a lot more business owners need to take advantage of it. And it's really a bridge until the state and the federal government really get their programs up and running and businesses are receiving those funds.
Now, one question with this, since churches aren't open and most people tithe in person. A lot of people just for whatever reason don't really tithe online, or they tithe when they are in church. So for churches that may be struggling financially throughout this, is there anything special set up for them? Because I read an article that said roughly about 20% of churches won't survive, another 3 months without people being there.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the federal program, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the EIDL, which is the Emergency Disaster Loan Fund, there are mechanisms for churches, faith organizations to apply for funding. Also, okay, through the state, I believe it's the Golden Leaf Foundation has been providing grants to churches, faith organizations, and nonprofits. Also, on the local level, we have, I want to go back to this real quick, Yolanda. We have the SHAR-MEC COVID-19 Response Fund. And so that is a partnership between United Way of Central Carolinas and the Foundation for the Carolinas. And so for local nonprofits, they can apply for grants if they are going to be able to help with this response locally. So that may look like a nonprofit helping with feeding programs, educational programs, any type of support.
Okay.
They can apply and be eligible to receive some sort of grant. So I'm on that committee. We've gone through 2 rounds so far. There's about $16 million in the fund. We've granted about $3 million so far, and the application process opened back up on April 20th, and it goes through May 1st. And if you go to the United Way of Central Carolinas, you can go and if you have a nonprofit, you can apply for a grant.
Yeah, because, and I just found that interesting because you see so much when you're watching all the coverage, everyone's talking about small businesses or restaurants or, massage parlors and nail salons, but not realizing churches have to operate as well.
Well, not only churches have to operate, I think you raise a great point. Not only do they have to operate, but churches provide so much more to our community. Most of our churches in our area, they have some sort of programming that's coming out of their quote unquote their buildings, right? So they may have a senior day program. They may have some sort of health awareness. They, and even, as just a central place of gathering, a place of safety for people, peace of mind. So you can't really put a value on that, but we know that we have to ensure that the faith community is included in all of our conversations as we move forward. So I'm glad you lifted that up because that's really important.
Thank you. So one other, so on states that, North Carolina, there's a shelter in place. So, and this is a funny question that was submitted, but should people contact the authorities on their neighbors if they see their neighbors with large gatherings, having cookouts, celebrations? What are the thoughts on that? What are the instructions on that?
Short answer, yes. Absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely. You need to call 311 where appropriate or 911 where appropriate. Listen, what's happening is there's technically it's really a stay-at-home order, but commonly referred to as shelter in place. Right. One thing that we have to realize, and I don't think that there's enough people taking this seriously. And so those people that are not, unfortunately, they're putting the rest of us in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. They're putting themselves at risk and in jeopardy. They're putting people that they love in jeopardy. And so, I think authorities should be made aware of any violations. And again, not to penalize people, but to educate folks, mm-hmm. to really ensure that we educate and let them understand the seriousness of it. I think CMPD and our law enforcement officials are committed to not necessarily taking people to jail or finding them at the first contact. They want to educate and give people the opportunity to comply. Okay.
Well, that's a good answer. It's interesting. I didn't expect that response, but wow. Okay. Yeah. So we've also.
So whoever submitted that question, thank you, because yes, tell.
That's funny. Okay, so in several areas in the United States, we've seen the death rates are just astronomically higher from COVID-19 in the African American community. So I don't know if you know the specifics, if that's the case here in Mecklenburg County, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, it is the case here in Mecklenburg County, just as it is across the nation, where we see significant populations of African Americans in particular. And so here in Mecklenburg County is something I personally have been lifting up since the data came out. My district, I have a lot of African Americans, and I'll tell you, there's a few things that this has done, and I'll tell you about the response in just a second, but I do want to highlight a couple of things. This situation has really, really put a spotlight on disparity.
It's exposed a lot, you're right.
It has. And so we've talked about it, people like you who are involved and extremely knowledgeable, you've known this, but for the greater population, it has really exposed a lot. It's exposed inequity and disparity within our healthcare system, within our communities as it relates to food insecurity,
even access to healthcare,
food insecurity,
right?
Education, digital divide,
Right.
transportation. All of these issues are interconnected. And this is really highlighted. And what you see again here in Mecklenburg County, almost 50% of the individuals that have contracted COVID-19, or not that have contracted, let me go back, that we know that have been tested and we know that have COVID-19 or had it. 50% have been African American, and then those our deaths out of the 29, I think it's 29 as of this taping, 50% or close to 50% being African American. And I'm rounding up, so I know for everybody who wants to get technical, I'm rounding up because it's in the high 48s. But even with that, it's a more significant. We are certainly an outlier, and we're certainly overrepresented in the disparity.
Right.
And that holds true. And again, that holds true for so many other factors and so many other quality of life indicators that we have to address as elected officials, as government, but government can't solve the problem, right? So as a community, we have to address these things as well. We have to be more serious about our health, because everybody in the African American community does not have access. There are those of us that have access, but we haven't. I don't always make the best choices.
Right. That's interesting. So, I mean, how do we combat that? I mean, I know we're predisposed with asthma and diabetes and high blood pressure, but overall, I mean, how do we overcome that? Like,
are we predisposed?
According to the Surgeon General, we are.
Okay.
According to the
So, I mean, because, and I asked that, and I'm not making light of it, but again, I think some of these things can be corrected, right?
Absolutely.
If the government, if we, ensure that in communities that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, if they had options for healthy food choices, they had access to healthcare, they have access to transportation, they have access to great paying and at least living wages, employment. So these are things that would help combat some of the determinants of health that we see that are negative, that impact us from a negative perspective. So, so I asked that more flippantly, but again, these are things, and then two, the second component, and I'm going to continue to go down this line as well, Yolanda, because I think it's important. It's very important for me, someone who has access, someone who does not fit the category that I just mentioned, that I make good choices, that I maintain a healthy lifestyle, that I make adjustments so that when situations like this hit, I don't fall into that category with all these underlying issues that have not only negative consequences, but detrimental consequences. And so it's up to me to train my children to, mirror and show them good patterns. And then those that are in my circle to communicate and educate so that we can do better. Now, I want to pivot to what we've done as a county to try to educate. So what we've done is we've put out a marketing campaign that's targeted toward the African American community. We have partnered with churches to help us get the message out around the seriousness and why we need to be social distancing. We've talked about the health disparities. We've stood up multiple testing sites within the Crescent here in Mecklenburg County. We know the Crescent is the area in the population going east and west that have experienced tremendous amount of disparities in all of the categories that we just named. And so we've done, we're partnering with our radio stations. We're also partnering with Black-owned media, because our radio stations, just because they serve or they have Black constituents, that doesn't mean that they're Black-owned.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we partner with Black-owned media companies like QC Metro and the County News and the Charlotte Post and Pride Magazine and those entities where we know that, you know, we have high concentrations of our people reading those publications and using those media outlets. And so we are also making sure we're getting the message out through there. We've put together a toolkit, which is on our website at mecnc.gov, that really provides some valuable information for people in the community.
That's good. And you said it's, what's that website again?
mecknc.gov.
Okay. All right. And one other question. So is there anything set up for landlords, any type of assistance program for landlords?
Actually, just through the small business lending programs, the city has stood up some programs, but specifically for landlords, no, it's really, you know, there's, you know, the city has come with a program where they're providing rental assistance.
Okay.
So that indirectly will help landlords as well. But, you know, that's a hard nut to crack there. So property management companies are obviously eligible for some of these lending programs. They can apply. And then, you know, there's rental assistance for their tenants. And so I think that is indirectly answers your question. Okay.
Okay. And then, you know, lastly, you're a man of faith, and I know you're active in your church. So yes. What do you say to people what do you say to clergy and pastors the ones that are still, because there are some that are still asking their members to come to church?
Yeah. Well, for me, and I'm just speaking personally, that's really disheartening for me.
Right.
It's really disheartening. You know, we don't ask people to demonstrate their faith by standing in the middle of the busiest intersection in town and stand in front of the bus and say, exercise your faith.
Right.
We want people to exercise common sense as we approach these things. And I don't think that there has to be, I don't think that leveraging science, medical science, or knowledge has to be contradictory towards my faith.
Right.
And I know the data that I'm looking at, the information that I'm looking at, and all of that. And even if I wasn't looking, if I just was watching the numbers and understanding the individuals who are impacted, I certainly understand that people are being adversely impacted. And the more we congregate and don't do the things that our public health officials are doing, it's going to be a problem, and it's going to be an issue. I mean, the scripture even tells us when Jesus went out into the desert for 40 days, and during that time, he was tempted multiple times by Satan. And each time he was able to, he never put himself in a position where God had to prove anything, right? He did not throw himself off the top of the temple. He didn't turn the stones into bread, but he exercised his faith in a way that, you know, showed an in-depth knowledge of the scripture and what was reasonable. And so I wish we would, you know, I encourage everyone to do that, to exercise and follow the direction of our Lord and Savior.
Yeah, and use common sense.
That's a great way to sum it up.
And use common sense. So, Mark, where can people reach you if they need to get in touch with you, or if they have additional questions? Where can we find you?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. You can always email me. It's mark.jerrell mecklenburgcountync.gov. You can go to any of my social media on Twitter. You can, DM me at HipPolitics, HIPOLITIX, or at Mark for the People. Of course, you go to my Facebook page, same thing, Mark for the People or Mark Jerrell. So, I'm readily accessible. I'm out trying to continue to educate our people. And what I say, Yolanda, I really say it out of love. I say it from just a love, and I want people to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
I want our families to be safe. I don't want anybody to lose anyone. I can't imagine the pain it is for people that have lost people during this time and they haven't been able to be with them, unexpectedly. And
Right.
it's a horrible thing for families to have to go through. Loss in general is rough, but
Right.
when you have to do it in isolation, and when you have to do it where you can't, touch your loved one or be with
Right.
them to
Right.
add any level of comfort, it's tough. And I want to just give a shout out to all of our first responders who are out there, for putting their lives on the line every day for all of us. They're on the front lines and they're putting their health at risk. And I think it does them a disservice for me to run around town in a very cavalier attitude and reckless to a certain extent.
And since you mentioned healthcare workers, how are the hospitals in Mecklenburg County in regards to the personal protective equipment and masks and gloves and ventilators? So are they operating fine? I mean, are they okay in regards to their inventory?
No, you know what? Great question. No one is okay. Everyone needs more.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is making do with what they have, but we need more. And I know the governor is working on it. I know it's not an issue just here locally, but we have people that have come and are getting together to make PPE and to
Right.
get that distributed. So, but right now it's not enough. I would say that I would think that they would tell us as well that they're probably not able, just because of the limited quantity, to be able to go by the whatever the recommended guidelines typically are. So thanks for lifting that up. And I mean, we should really keep those workers in prayer.
Right.
And keep them lifted up. They are working a tremendous amount of hours. And, when we get to when restrictions are relaxed for us, they are still going to be working extremely hard, because the flattening of the curve really extends this thing out. And they are, they're they're doing all the heavy lifting. And that goes for our law enforcement, our healthcare workers, and all of those people that I missed calling, but they're all on the front lines, and I definitely appreciate all of them.
Two other points I wanted to make before I let you go. I know I'm trying to be mindful of your time, because I know
You're good.
you are
You're good.
let's
Let's talk about it.
Man. So I know I saw something on the news probably about 2 weeks ago in regards to domestic violence calls and how they've just increased tremendously since the shelter in place order. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can in a limited way. We have seen an influx and a spike in domestic violence, and it's extremely sad. And one of the things we've done some things to provide additional resources as it relates to domestic violence victims, and to ensure that we are responsive and we have places for people that are victims to go. Of course, you can't say where they are and
Right.
All of that, but certainly I'm glad you lifted that up, because we have seen this in stressful. We know when people are in stressful situations, we do see an increase with that population, which is very sad. And it was very important that we provide additional outlets for those folks here at the county. Another population that we were very concerned about were our homeless population. population.
Right.
And so we were able to contract with a few hotels in town to provide places for those that may have been impacted so that we could quarantine, because that was very important for us to be able to control the spread among that population in particular. And so we have some hotels that we stood up for quarantine purposes, and also hotels to house our families, our homeless families during this time, and also partnered with crisis assistance. And initially, when this came out, Yolanda, we were able to allow like 600 families to stay in hotels. They were already living in hotels, but we foot the bill for a couple, 2-3 weeks through our partnership with Crisis to keep them housed. And so the first things that we did in the county was certainly around our seniors, our homeless, and all those people that were most vulnerable during this time. Those were the initial actions that were taken.
And another vulnerable group are children in poverty. We all know the school is a place where some kids, that's probably the only meal they eat is in school. So was there anything set up to continue feeding kids, to continue feeding children?
We did. Yeah, the one thing that we did, that's a great question. So that was another action that we took. So we partnered with during the summertime, we do a feeding program with CMS. And so we were able to use those same sites that we use. So some of our recreation centers, some of county facilities, and some of their facilities, we were able to stand up about 70 sites across the county.
Oh, that's remarkable.
To feed. And so it was just a grab and go. So the meals that were already prepared, and they drive up, grab and go. And then, but here was the wonderful thing about this community. Not only did we have those feeding sites, but churches and nonprofits got together. They stood up feeding sites.
Right.
And so what happened was there were probably about double that, like about 150 feeding sites all across the county where people were able to go, no questions asked, nothing. You grab and go. I think sometimes people had to sign something or something to that. But essentially, no questions asked at the vast majority of the sites. Grab and go. The sheriff, we have a wonderful, wonderful sheriff in Sheriff McFadden, and his team has been going into community. They were going into communities, still going into communities, feeding people, and just I will tell you this, and I said this at one of our board meetings, that the response from the community has been amazing. Like the care and concern for people, even when we get nasty emails, because people are so passionate about our homeless brothers and sisters, or our children, or to your point, the domestic violence victims, and they want to hold us accountable and say, what are you doing to help? How could you turn your back, even though we're not, but they don't always see, but it's still wonderful that people care. And so, of course, you don't take it personally when they send it, because it's coming from a space of care and concern for their brothers and sisters. And Yolanda, I'm telling you, it's wonderful. I've been so proud of the actions of our community, not only the county, but our community, our faith community, our nonprofits, the government response, and then just person to person, peer to peer has been wonderful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's almost like it reaffirms your faith in humanity.
It really does. It really, to a large extent, I think you're right. It does.
Yeah.
It does. So.
And one other group that I want to speak on before I let you go is the mentally ill. And like we have people who, we know on medication or, diagnosed maybe in institutions, but just being home, being, the shelter in place, how, it could just, people are starting to become depressed now.
Absolutely. The
So I
mental
mean,
health
just not
aspect
being,
of
and then
this,
not being able to have the social connection that they're used to. So
yeah.
people is actually causing depression. So what are is there anything in place for that? Are there any avenues or
Yeah,
any
so
outreach?
I put out a mental health hotline that Cardinal Innovations has stood up. Cardinal is the entity that contracts with the county. They're responsible for all our behavioral health services, essentially. So they're essentially an arm of the county, and so they set up a mental health hotline. I can send that to you so you can post it. But definitely, the mental health aspect is one that gets overlooked oftentimes, and it is, this is a circumstance that is creating a tremendous amount of anxiety. You and I have our faith and our families to lean on. And it's stressful for us.
Right,
So imagine those folks that may be alone, those folks that need medication, those folks that are in um, dire straits,
right.
dire straits in the amount of stress and anxiety that they're going through. But I've also seen people that are so resilient,
Hmm.
and even as African Americans, we are such a resilient
Yes, we are.
people, and this is another testament to the strength of our ancestors and our forefathers and
Hmm.
what they've done, and
Absolutely.
the foundation that they've laid. And it's their shoulders that we stand on, and that we are able to stand strong during these times. I mean, this isn't new to us in the sense of tough times,
Right,
right? But we
right.
all know, and we heard the old saints used to say, tough times don't last always.
You got that right.
So, that is, something I'm really proud of our people,
Hmm.
that, that we are so resilient. We're resilient through the toughest of times. And,
Yeah.
we know, where our strength lies, and we know where
Yes.
our help
Yes, we
comes
do.
from.
Yes,
And
we do.
so, those are the things that, is going to help us make it through. But here's the thing, though, Yolanda, here's the thing. We know we're already starting a race and running a race that started with us already 100 yards back.
Correct. Correct.
My role as an elected official is to make sure when we come out on the other end of this, we're
Hmm.
not 150 or 200 yards back.
Exactly.
But here's the challenge to everybody that's watching us and listening. I can't do it alone.
Hmm.
And you can't expect government to do it alone. Yes, hold us accountable.
Right.
Allow me to put in the structural mechanisms and whatever needs to be put in place to provide the level of support. But then we got to take advantage of it as a people.
Absolutely.
We got
Absolutely.
to make sure we get the education. We got to make sure that we demand that food insecurity doesn't exist in our neighborhood. We have got to start trying to live a healthy lifestyle. We
Right.
have got to make certain changes to go along with the policy that
Hmm.
will be put in place. And
Right.
so we all have to work together.
Right.
That I think that is, okay, there's a lot more to it, of
Yeah.
course.
I mean, and
Sometimes,
I totally get what you're saying. I mean,
yeah,
accountability goes both ways. I totally get what you're saying. And we also have to be involved. We have to be involved. So I
please.
100%
And
get
speaking
what
of
you're
that,
saying.
Henderson, speaking of that, um, you know, we still have an election coming up.
Absolutely. A very important one.
We still have an election coming up, and we can't have any excuses about what. Let's make the proper preparations now, right? If
Correct.
we're not going to be in person, let's let people know how to fill out that absentee, how to request that absentee ballot, you
Absolutely.
know, and let's have a push,
Hmm.
because some of this stuff that what we're dealing with at the state level would not be here if, folks would have come out in 2010 during those midterms,
Right.
and we would not have had all these state legislatures turn
Right.
with their ideology that is certainly not pro people. They're more pro business, or they're
Hmm.
pro gun, or whatever they are. But
Right.
we need people there that are pro people, that will
Right.
allow for Medicaid expansion
Mhm.
and help support people that need support and want to put those mechanisms to help. So let's go vote November, everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what people don't understand. Elections have consequences. Elections have consequences.
They do.
And or lack of participating in them have consequences.
They do.
So it
They
is
do.
very, very, very important. And so I will definitely be reaching back out to you to come do some events at the church again. You know I will.
All right,
So,
you better. You better.
I thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you
Anything
for
else?
having me.
Anything else you wanna end with? You wanna close?
No, well, I would like to say that just peace and blessings to my New Zion family. I love you guys and thank you for what you do, because this is so important. I think it is so important for people of faith to be engaged in their community, be engaged in the country, what's going on, and to continue to educate. And again, we don't have to agree on everything, right? We don't have to agree on every point, but let's educate, let's be engaged, let's have substantive dialogue so that, we can uplift our people and move forward. Let's ensure that we have a generation that's coming up behind us that can do better than what we've done.
Right.
And so whatever those components are, let's do that. And I just appreciate what New Zion has done, what you're doing, and the committee. And I think it's something that we should all be doing.
Right. And I 100% agree. And Pastor Johnson is, he's fully on board. I'm always, pushing him to go in that direction and not necessarily be radical, but, hey, the Black church was the cornerstone for the civil rights movement. So, and we have to get back to that mindset.
Well, the Black church is still the cornerstone.
We have
where everybody runs in the community, whether they're a believer or not.
The church.
When they get in trouble, they run to the church.
They run to the church.
There's something innate. There's something innate in there that says you can go there.
You can go to the church.
That's a place of refuge right there. And so for so many years, that has been the place of refuge for us. And in years to come, it'll still be the place of refuge. And it'll go beyond just the physical. But it really provides a space and a place for our mental, our emotional, and most importantly, our spiritual. And so we're going to continue to use and leverage, our houses of worship to be those places of refuge for our community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much, dear brother Mark. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you, my sister. Thank you.
Fighting the good fight.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Give the family my love. I'll talk to you.
Stay here. Talk to you.
All right. Bye.